कि हम इलेक्शन खत्म हुआ उसी रात को यूएस में जैसे रिजल्ट आने शुरू हो गए, हम भी काउंटिंग शुरू करते कर सकते हैं, नहीं करते, क्योंकि अगले दिन हम इंतजार करते हैं कहाँ कहाँ से कंप्लेंट्स आई हैं, कहाँ कहाँ से एविडेंस आई है, सीसीटीवी रिपोर्ट्स आई हैं, वहाँ पे हम रीपोल कराते हैं। समटाइम्स हम रीपोल कभी रीपोल कराते हैं जब तक हमें ये संतुष्टि न हो जाए कि इलेक्शन फेयर हुआ था, इसके लिए हम 3 दिन रखते हैं।
Basically, there is no soft power without hard power. Let's not exaggerate the role of soft power. They won't give visas on our passports to people from Arunachal Pradesh, and also from our army generals and all on official visits to China because they were serving in Jammu and Kashmir. The stapled visas. We should make ourselves stronger, build our capacities, bide our time, not look out for a conflict with China. And the best deterrence against China is our accretion to our defense capabilities, which we are building, but which will take time.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to moderate this panel on a subject as fascinating and as profound as Bharat from the lens of the world. From the corridors of international diplomacy to the ballot boxes that empower more than 1 billion people, India's journey offers resilience, innovation, and rich diversity. Yet, this journey is not without challenges, whether it's the complex geopolitical landscapes or ensuring the sanctity of India's democratic processes. We have two eminent speakers today, Ambassador Sibal and Quraishi Saab. Ambassador Sibal will throw us light as a seasoned diplomat on India's global stature, while Dr. Quraishi will also reflect uh, on the impact of India's democratic processes on its international image. I'll start with Sibal Saab. Sir, how do you assess India's evolving role in global diplomacy as it balances relations with countries like major powers like US, China, and Russia?
Well, there is a historical basis to this. Even during the Cold War, when the West and the Soviet bloc were adversaries, India chose the politics of non-alignment. Didn't want to be aligned to either of the two blocs so as to keep our independence in foreign policy making as also our autonomy. Now, of course, these are not absolutes. No country can be independent in foreign policy. You have to work with partners. Even the United States has to work with partners. And so did the Soviet Union at that time. But nevertheless, where very vital national interests are involved, the attempt was to make sure that we pursued a course which we thought was in our national interest and unwillingly should not get involved in the conflicts of others, which would then damage us. The other was that if we keep our doors and windows open to all sides, then theoretically it will help our developmental process. It didn't quite happen that way. I'm talking of the past. The Soviet Union became our biggest defense and economic partner. In fact, when the Soviet Union collapsed, our biggest economic partner was the Soviet Union. And that actually had a major role in causing our crisis in 1991. With the United States and the West in general, we had great difficulties. The one country that has damaged us strategically the most is the United States of America, because it imposed sanctions on us since 1974, denied us access to technology, curbed us as much as they could. We had very little economic ties with them. Because they believed in private sector and did not want to cooperate with the public sector. Therefore, they were not part of our economic development. All the heavy industry and everything else was set up by the Soviet Union. So the roots of this are there in our non-aligned policy as well as our intention and our policy not to get involved in the quarrels of others. And that remains today. Now we don't talk about non-alignment because the movement has actually become irrelevant. But the thought behind it has not become irrelevant for us. And therefore, we are keeping our relations with the West and the East, if you like. We are maintaining and preserving our ties with Russia. After all, we have invested, it began in 1955, so we've invested 70 years in this relationship with virtually no ups and downs. So it's and they are a permanent member of the Security Council. They've helped us in the Security Council on many occasions. And then they are our biggest defense partner. In fact, if there was a rupture of any kind in our relations with Russia, our defense will be compromised. And at a time when we are facing severe challenges on our border. But remarkably, our biggest partner today is the United States of America. Our biggest trade partner, both in goods and services, is the United States. The biggest investor in India, the biggest source of technology is the United States of America. And we cooperate with them on so many issues, which is vital for us, renewable energy, energy transition, etc., etc. We've just set up a year ago or a year ago, the initiative for emerging and critical technologies, which is absolutely vital in terms of our, in cooperation with the United States, developing our expertise in artificial intelligence, in quantum technologies, in robotics, and what have you. We have this Indus X, which is a combination of academics, universities, private sector, innovators, government, along with similar organizations on the other side, to actually develop our respective expertise combined in artificial intelligence. So now, it's never a neat situation where we can say that we are friends with all and we don't have adversaries. We do have adversaries. And we have two adversaries sitting right on our border and a third one in the making. So there's China and there's Pakistan, and now we have problems with Bangladesh. But this is part and parcel of international life. We cannot determine what should be the policies and approach towards us of other countries. And finally, everybody agrees that India is in a relatively sweet spot. We are the fastest growing big economy. We are already the fifth largest, though in GDP terms it doesn't look that impressive. Though in PPP terms it's not bad. Then everybody thinks that by 2027, latest by 2030, we may be the third largest economy. And potentially in 2047, according to IMF and World Bank and others, we'll be the second largest economy after China. So people are interested in us. They want to look at the Indian market. They want to attach themselves to a rising power. Though, mind you, they're not very happy about it. That's a different matter. And that's why we have problems, even with the United States. They interfere in our internal affairs. They try and shake us out of our sense of well-being that we are on the road to great achievements. We will not be easily given a place in the UN Security Council. We will continue to have that aspiration, but there will be roadblocks. So already they have a huge problem in China becoming a competitive power, which seeks to replace the United States as a preeminent power. They don't want India going down the same course. And one of the reasons that they are today paying a lot of attention to us is that they want to keep us within their orbit. So we have to follow a policy where we remain partially in their orbit, but we also have other orbits. And that's why we have membership of Quad and membership of the Indo-Pacific concept and relationship with the West and FTAs which are largely with the West, if you like. I include Australia in that. And at the same time, we are members of the SCO and of BRICS and everything else, because that gives us the necessary diplomatic space to pursue our interests. If we get attached to one group, then our foreign policy choices will be constrained. But if we are in both groups, then both sides have an interest to reach out to us and maintain good ties with us, because they don't want us to swing in this direction or that direction. Anyway, I can go on and on, but Mr. Quraishi would have things to say.
Quraishi Saab, India is often cited as the world's largest democracy. How do you how do you think that the world perceives its electoral process, and what are the lessons that other nations can learn from us?
You know, when I joined the election commission, I used to travel to many countries, and I came to the conclusion that most of the world has heard of India, not to talk of the big ones with whom we were had dealing, but all that they knew about India was a large country with a democracy. So the fact that we were a democracy known to most of the world was something which was our USP. Uh, our elections have been hailed widely. Hillary Clinton once in a public speech which was internationally telecast, she called India's election as gold standard. We couldn't have bribed her to say so. She felt it. Barack Obama earlier had called our 2019 election as a historic election from which the world has to learn. New York Times headline was the greatest show on earth. And I'm invited to speak to various parts of the world, various from Harvard to Oxford. Normally, they choose this title. They ask me how the greatest show on earth is assembled. Please explain that. Or they insist that I speak on the title of my first book, which was An Undocumented Wonder, the Making of the Great India Election. Now, this undocumented wonder actually conceals the greatness of India's election, and how I got this title. When I was writing my book, like many journalists, you are a journalist, are you? The rest journalists. Journalists normally think they know everything, and they are contemptuous of everything which the establishment does. अरे कुरैशी साहब ये क्या है, टेक्नोलॉजी की एज में आप लोग पोलिंग के 3 दिन बाद 4 दिन बाद काउंटिंग कराते हैं. हमने कहा अरे यार तुमको पता नहीं है तो बोला ना करो, तुम ने देखा नहीं कि हम करते क्या हैं, कैसे करते. इसी सवाल का जवाब अगर आपको चाहिए तो मैं बताता हूँ कि ये हमारा एक टैक्टिकल मूव है कि these 3 days are kept by us for a possible repoll. Because once we have announced the result, we have lost all power. It shifts to the High Court through the election petition. So वो पावर हम चुनने से पहले कि हम इलेक्शन खत्म हुआ उसी रात को यूएस में जैसे रिजल्ट आने शुरू हो गए हम भी काउंटिंग शुरू करते कर सकते हैं, नहीं करते, क्योंकि अगले दिन हम इंतजार करते हैं कहाँ कहाँ से कंप्लेंट्स आई हैं, कहाँ कहाँ से एविडेंस आई है, सीसीटीवी रिपोर्ट्स आई हैं, वहाँ पे हम रीपोल कराते हैं. समटाइम्स हम रीपोल कभी रीपोल कराते हैं जब तक हमें ये संतुष्टि न हो जाए कि इलेक्शन फेयर हुआ था. इसके लिए हम 3 दिन रखते हैं. किस जनरली लोगों को नहीं पता, बहुत लोगों से ये क्रिटिसिज्म सुना. तो एक साहब थे जर्नलिस्ट फाइनेंशियल एक्सप्रेस के इंडिया दिल्ली के एडिटर, उनको मैंने कहा कि वो उनका ने प्रोवोक किया. मैंने कहा बेटा जाके देखो कहाँ रहते हो तुम. मैंने कहा नोएडा. मैंने डीएम नोएडा को कहा कि रोहित बंसल साहब आएंगे, इनको दिखाना क्या करते हो तुम लोग. ही केम बैक टोटली कन्वर्टेड और उन्होंने एक पीस लिखा गवर्नेंस नाउ है किसी में कि साहब आई वाज सो इम्प्रेस्ड विद द प्रोफेशनलिज्म एंड समथिंग and I wish this was televised to on the nation on the live TV for the nation confidence because these people whom we normally call babus, how professional they are, what hard work they do, and I have come to the conclusion that India's election commission is the most self-effacing organization, and India's election an undocumented wonder. So the guy got converted when he saw us in action, which we don't talk about. He says we only know which politician has defected to which party, who is forming the government, or we all know about politics, but who brought those politicians on those seats? That 15 million people, all civil servant, mind you, bureaucracy, उसका कोई जिक्र ही नहीं करता. तो उनकी परमिशन से फिर मैंने ये किताब का टाइटल अनडॉक्यूमेंटेड वंडर रखा, तो क्योंकि इसके बारे में वाकई किसी को पता ही नहीं होता. फिर दूसरी चीज़ मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि हमने जहाँ हम डायमंड जुबली ऑफ इलेक्शन कमीशन 2010-11 में मना रहे थे, हमने 35 कंट्रीज़ को बुलाया, उनके चीफ इलेक्शन कमिश्नर को, और उनके जो कमेंट थी, ग्लोबल गुरु, किसी ने कुछ कहा, किसी ने कुछ कहा, जनरल एक्नॉलेजमेंट तो था. फिर हमने सोचा कि जब इतना हमारे अच्छी गुडविल है, तो एक इंस्टीट्यूट हम बनाने की सोच रहे थे उस वक्त मेरे वक्त में, कि 15 मिलियन पीपल, ज़ीरो एरर इलेक्शन हमारी एक्सपेक्टेशन, तो दैट मीन्स ट्रेनिंग भी फर्स्ट क्लास होनी चाहिए. तो हमने एक इंस्टीट्यूट बनाया, इंडिया इंटरनेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी एंड इलेक्शन मैन. I would like to mention here that I was not keen about word international here. For me, IIT, IIM, India was the brand, which was globally known. So I wanted India Institute. तो मेरे एक कोलीग ने कहा कि साहब इंटरनेशनल पे डाल दो, प्लीज डाल दो, प्लीज डाल दो. वो बुजुर्ग थे, मैंने उनके उसमें डाल दिया, लेकिन अच्छा हुआ कि मैंने उनकी बात मान ली. इसके बाद जो इंस्टीट्यूट हुआ, जिसको कल मैंने जिक्र किया था कि लॉ मिनिस्ट्री ने खूब अपोज किया कि ये क्यों बना रहे हैं, क्या बना रहे हैं, ज़रूर कुरैशी का कोई पर्सनल इंटरेस्ट होगा. वी वेंट अहेड एंड वी डिड इट, एंड in 12 years 130 countries plus actually 134 countries के chief election commissioners and the top management have come to us for training. पूरी दुनिया अगर इंडिया के इलेक्शन को इस लायक समझते हैं कि उससे सीखने के लिए आते हैं, इससे बड़ा कोई बाकी तो आदमी ज़बानी जमा खरीद बहुत कर लेता है, बोस्टिंग कर लेगा, इसके बड़ा ये तो एक्चुअल फिगर है 134. आप गूगल करके देख लीजिए, 134 कंट्रीज़ के लोग हमसे ट्रेनिंग ले चुके हैं. जबकि इसमें से अब से 2 साल पहले तक तो हम इम्प्रोवाइज टॉप फ्लोर ऑफ इलेक्शन कमीशन पे इम्प्रोवाइज जगह पे काम करते हैं. उसके बाद 5 एकड़ का बहुत खूबसूरत द्वारका में हमारा एक कॉम्प्लेक्स बन गया है. अब हम विल बी एबल टू इनटेक मेनी मोर पीपल. मैं बस एक चीज़ तो ख़त्म करूँगा कि जब हमने ये पहला डायमंड जुबली में 35 लोग बुलाए, तो दे वर वेरी इम्प्रेस. राष्ट्रपति ने उसको वो किया, चेयर किया. तो इन लोगों ने कहा कि साहब आप इसको एनुअल फीचर क्यों नहीं बना लेते. दे वर विलिंग, दे वर डाइंग टू मेक इंडिया द लीडर, कि इसको आप डेमोक्रेसी का हब बना लीजिए, हर साल ये क्या कीजिए. हमारे लिए 35 लोगों का खर्चा 2-3 दिन का कमरे का किराया 10-15-20 हज़ार होता है, और उनको गाड़ी दे देते थे, 25,000-30,000 हो जाएगा. कोई बड़ी बात नहीं थी. मुझसे गलती हो गई, मैंने प्रधानमंत्री जी से जिक्र कर दिया कि जी ऐसा हम सोच रहे हैं. तो उन्होंने एक सेंटेंस में बड़े पोलाइटली, बहुत जेंटल, बहुत काइंड, डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह, उन्होंने कहा देखो कुरैशी, फेमिलियरिटी ब्रीड्स कंटेम्प्ट. तो मैं समझ गया कि उन्होंने इस आइडिया को अप्रूव नहीं किया, तो हमने उसको ड्रॉप कर दिया. लेकिन स्मॉलर लेवल पे सार्क कंट्रीज़ के को हम बुलाते हैं. एवरी 25th of January विच आई मेंशन इज़ आवर नेशनल वोटर्स डे. उस पर ये लोग आते हैं. नेशनल वोटर्स डे की कहानी की अगर आप मुझे इजाज़त दें तो और सवाल बच जाएंगे कि ये कैसे पैदा हुआ था. मैंने कल जिक्र किया था कि लोगों को नहीं मालूम था कि इलेक्शन कमीशन का जन्म इंडिया के जन्म होने से एक दिन पहले हो गया था. कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन फ्रेमवर्क की इतनी इंपॉर्टेंस थी, नहीं मालूम था. हमने कहा उस दिन से मैं उड़ीसा में, आई वाज टॉकिंग टू अ सिविल सोसाइटी ग्रुप लाइक दिस, somebody raised the hand and he said 18 years is a special age when suddenly you become adult, and so that we must celebrate. I said that's a very good statement, let us think of a celebration. तो हमने क्या सेलिब्रेशन सोचा, अपने ग्रुप बिठाया उस पर कि हम यंग वोटर्स जो उनका 12 से 15% वोट, 18 से 23 वाले ग्रुप के सिर्फ 12 से 15% रजिस्टर करते थे अपने वोटर. तो इतनी इंडिफरेंस क्यों, इतनी. तो हमने पहले एक स्टडी कराई, KBP स्टडी, नॉलेज, एटीट्यूड, बिहेवियर एंड प्रैक्टिस. बहुतों को तो पता ही नहीं था कि 18 पे वोट के हकदार हो जाएंगे, या अगर पता था तो ये नहीं मालूम था कि क्या करना है, प्रोसीजर नहीं पता था. और अगर करना है तो ये कि एग्जैक्टली कौन सी डेट को एलिजिबल होते हैं, विच इज़ 1 जनवरी. और चौथी चीज़ हमने ये पाई कि दे हैड कंटेम्प्ट फॉर पॉलिटिशियन, कि सब नेता चोर हैं. All 4 needed to be addressed because this last statement is a dangerous statement, is wrong. I say that India has become a virtual superpower. Pakistan, Bangladesh, we all became independent together. And where are they and where are we? thanks to the political leadership. We had all through 75 years, we had great leadership, which has taken us where we are. And this is because of the democracy and the electoral process. And world acknowledges and हमें इसको और outreach और हमारे पास बहुत बड़ा शानदार कॉम्प्लेक्स हो गया, अब हम और लोगों को एकोमोडेट कर पाएंगे. इस तरह मैं समझता हूँ कि हमारी जो एक वो है विश्व गुरु होने की जो ख्वाहिश है, उसमें बिट बाय बिट होगा. हमारा इलेक्शन कमीशन ने अपना कंट्रीब्यूशन उसमें दे रखा है.
Thank you, Quraishi sir. Ambassador Sibal, I would like to ask you, in your view, how effective has India been in leveraging its soft power? Culture, democracy, diaspora. Has it all helped in shaping up its global image?
Basically, there is no soft power without hard power. Let's not exaggerate the role of soft power. The person who invented this term, soft power, I knew him very well, this American professor. He was Assistant Defense Secretary, Deputy Defense Secretary when I was in Washington. Anyway, America, soft power is effective around the world because it's the preeminent country. And everything associated with a country which is very successful, which is dominating, which controls international narratives on everything, they then use these means at their disposal to spread their culture, their values, their thinking across the world, and that is their soft power. And this person whose name I'm forgetting, he said that, look, the United States doesn't have to achieve all its objectives through hard power. We can achieve many of our objectives through soft power. It's only when the soft power won't work, then we'll use hard power. Anyway, insofar as India is concerned, let me tell you, in most of my early career in the diplomatic service, India soft power was limited to cultural circles, Indologists, and a very small part of the academia and the elite that was interested. For the rest, they had the traditional view of India, country of elephants and snakes and poverty and this and that. In fact, the first film on the city of joy, Calcutta, by this French fellow, Louis Malle, that actually, in a sense, for the Western world, defined India. Poverty. And then overpopulation. How this country can feed itself. Will not be able to feed itself. That kind of a thing. Democracy, yes, but there was always a debate later on that I came across in the 70s, that for a developing country, which is the better route to development? China model or the Indian model? And for the leftists, who always have a great influence on thinking, it was the China model. And India was looked down upon because India never had a revolution. So for India to gain that respect in global affairs, we needed to have a revolution and have revolutionary leaders. So we suffered on that account. There was also a view that India's democracy is chaotic and it prevents India from playing a role on global affairs because it's too much concentrated on managing its domestic problems. So India strategically didn't matter too much for the world. In any case, the Indian economy was very weak, so we were not a big market. But even in terms of our so-called democratic credentials, they were not greatly respected because it was seen as a country mired in its internal problems and managing its domestic issues. Then I'll give you a solid example of where apart from lip service to, for our democracy, in actual hardcore policies, we gained no advantage of being a democracy, frankly, on the international stage. China, under Mao, was quoted by the United States of America. Under Xi Jinping, continued to be quoted by the United States of America. A communist dictatorship, communist party was built up. And today, of course, as a result of that gross mistake, they don't know how to deal with China. But India was a democracy, roughly demographically very similar in terms of our size, future, potential, everything else. In fact, as the second largest country in Asia, we were there as a democracy. They didn't build us up. They built communist China instead. So my argument always been, fine, democracy, but has democracy actually given us some plus value on international relations? Except for one, that we were not seen as a hostile country or as a subversive country. At the end of the day, we were a democracy, therefore we were manageable. And therefore we were not a danger. And therefore there was no real effort for a regime change in India. Because regime change would be if you are a threat to their dominance. So that way, yes, it might have helped us. Today, our democracy is genuinely admired in the developing world. As Quraishi Saab has said, all these people who are great votaries of Indian democracy, they actually marvel at the fact, because Africa is also a country with so many tribes and internal diversities and this and that, they can't manage their affairs, a constant coup d'etats and military rule and everything else. And they see India, which has, in terms of diversity, scales which are much larger, and yet they are able to manage. So there is admiration in the developing world for Indian democracy. But in the developed world, well, now you see the propaganda against us, backsliding democracy, capture of institutions, this and that constant propaganda by New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, The Economist, the Financial Times, the Le Monde in France, or Libération in France, or France 24, or all the American media. They're all denigrating, VDEM, they're all denigrating our democracy all the time, pick up small issues. In a country of 1.4 billion people, which is larger than the whole of Europe and almost twice the population of Europe, things will happen somewhere in one corner of India. But because they happen in one corner in India, the way it is projected, it is happening all over India. So, and the narratives are controlled by them. And we have internal lobbies who pick up on those narratives because that's a good way to hit at the government. So they amplify them in our media. So if VDEM says something, that becomes the Bible. That is the last word on the state of Indian democracy. And that argument is then used to attack, to do internal domestic politics. So, and finally, look at what happened in Georgia. The president of Georgia, her term expires on December 16th. He says, I'm not going to give up power because the election that was held was rigged. And why? This doesn't suit them because they want Georgia to come into the fold of NATO and not make any moves, of friendly moves towards Russia. Now, what's happened in Romania? The prospective, the opposition leader won 63.3% of the votes. The court has declared the election illegal. There's not a squeeze from the West, be them or this or that or that. They're all very happy that pro-Russians have not been allowed to gain power in these countries. So, therefore, I don't care a damn, sorry for the word, what they think of our democracy. We should deal with our democracy, improve our democracy, reform our democracy, and this and that and that. And the fact we have an International Yoga Day, or our Indian culture and everything else, that is a plus point. There are lobbies who relate to that, but they are not the policy makers. They are not the policy makers are very hard-headed people. And when they look at you, they look at your economic growth and not your democracy, if they want to really invest in your country, help you, not help you, build you up, help build you up economically or what have you, because they derive a lot of profits from that. So one should be a bit cynical about this.
Qureshi Saab, India takes pride in its diverse democracy, but there is a growing narrative of political polarization. How does this dichotomy reflect on India's image globally?
Recently, a couple of years ago, I asked an IFS officer, it's a very senior IFS officer, the same question. And I asked him, what is happening in India? Do you think the world knows about it? So he gave a very great answer. He said, look, every country has an ambassador in New Delhi. The whole day they're sending reports. So what else are they doing? They're sending all these reports. Therefore, the whole world knows what is happening. So the fact is, these get reflected in democracy. Taking off from what Mr. Sibal had said, when I was writing my book, An Undocumented Wonder, with this pompous title, as some people might say, I came across, toward the end of my writing, I came across Economist Intelligence Unit, which publishes a World Democracy Index from 2006. And they classified India as a flawed democracy. I was very angry, very upset, and like every Indian, believed in conspiracy theory that this must be a deliberate ploy to show us down. But when I investigated why is it that they are showing us a flawed democracy and not a full democracy, I found exactly for the same reason for which we are protesting day in and day out. 300 million illiterate people are bringing our ranking down. The representation of women in legislature was 7 to 9%. Something to be embarrassed about. That is what is pulling us down. So how can we complain? Now, of course, the present regime has passed this reservation of a Women Act, and 2029 it will get implemented. The representation will go up to 33%. I think our rank will automatically. Now, these some of these indexes, the 46% of all MPs have criminal cases pending against them according to their own affidavits, not an allegation from somebody, affidavit which they filed before returning officer. 46%, and from 2004 it has been going up and up and up. It will surely show us as a flawed democracy. Now, a great election is not necessarily great democracy. We elect people, even criminals get elected. We have no control, and that becomes a blot on democracy. So, for the 93% of MPs in the current parliament are croropatis. Now, money power in the election also pulls us down. Now, you will remember a few years ago, the government of India has picked on ease of doing business, where we were 130 or 40, and focused on it, went hammer and tongs for 1 year, and we improved 40, 50 ranks. What stops us from picking on this democracy index also, which was in 2013, we were 27. Now we are 53. So it is sliding, but it was once upon a time 27 also. We should try and go back to 27 by the measures we are taking. Reservation of women is one, more literacy, more investment, checking corruption, checking money power. So we should do introspection and try and improve, because in fact what happened after the latest index, some people went to Economist office in London protesting. How dare you show us down? How do you collect this data? Where does it come from? And we will give you data. Now, they say, look, we are doing this in 203 countries. Same criteria. We have no special criteria for India. And what do you mean that you will give us the data? We have our means of doing this research methodology, which we follow across the globe. So, if we go that lane, that there is some conspiracy, we will not find a solution. If we try and introspect and find a way out, improve the thing as a challenge, as we did in ease of doing business, I'm sure my aspiration is that India The largest democracy should become the greatest democracy, and we know how it will be. The 4 or 5 electoral reform that we keep talking about, we need a political will to achieve that.
Ambassador Sibal, India's relationship with China has been tense, particularly post Galwan. Uh, what do you think could have been done differently? And can you give us a perspective on this?
Well, before I answer that question, you would ask about polarization. Look at the United States of America. It is much more polarized than we are. And much more seriously because here we have how many recognized political parties? Whatever the figure, 21, whatever. Recognized political parties. We have regional parties, which exercise power in their own regions. So that kind of neat polarization is very difficult in our country. But in the United States, with the two-party system, the polarization is extremely intense, and it colors every aspect of their political life, and because of that, their social life and economic life. Number two, we have a situation in the United States of America, and here I come to global rankings, where Trump last time said, "I've been cheated," and he didn't want to yield. And in fact, there was an incident at the Capitol Hill. Before that, when the previous election, where this ozone, Al Gore, the ozone man, they had to count those. They have a particular name for that. They had to count those little slips and this and that. The Supreme Court had to decide. Supreme Court. There was no confidence in the fairness of elections. And their entire system of electoral college and this and that is absolutely anti-democratic. But has anybody said the American democracy should be brought down to number 100 or something? They still are emblematic of democratic functioning. And then they talk about the influence of the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned against in the 1950s. And the entire lobbying system, they have actually legalized corruption. There's PACs, the Political Accounts Committee or whatever they're called, where you can pump in a whole lot of money. Here they talk about Adani Modi. Look at Elon Musk and the support he is giving to Trump. Millions he's put into his election campaign. But there's no hue and cry internationally about this. And this business about rankings and this and that, these fellows, they always want to sit on judgment on others. They have lost their global power, their preeminence. They can't control you through physical power by occupying you. They use these rankings and all, freedom of expression, religious freedom, democracy, this and that. They're always ranking you. Why? Why don't they mind their own business and let us be? I mean, we are adult people. We can hopefully manage our own problems, and we should. And there should be enough internal upsurge in the country to bring about these reforms. Now, with regard to China, I think the question to ask is, what is it that China should do? I mean, we've not committed aggression against China at all. In 1954, we just handed over Tibet to them without actually asking for a clarification of the border. It was a giveaway. It was a huge mistake that was committed. And in 1962, after all, when this criticism of Nehru's forward policy, what was that forward policy? It just was that since they had occupied Exai Chin without us knowing, then we should have more of a presence in the areas that belong to us so that we are not caught by surprise. Therefore, we should put more feet on the ground. Now, that has been twisted against us by the British and others, that we were responsible for the India-China war. But it was a totally uncalled for war by Mao, and he did it for various reasons. And the primary reason, of course, one of the reasons was that he understood that India was going to be a challenge, and India has to be put in its place. After that, they have in Galwan, try to encroach into our line of control. Before that, we've had incidents in Demsang and Chumar and elsewhere, which were provoked by them. In fact, they do it at very crucial junctures. When Xi Jinping was in Gujarat and they were on the Jhula, they did the Chumar incident. Then when something else happened, they did the Devsang incident, and our foreign minister then went to China to tell them that we will cancel the visit of your prime minister to India if this is not stopped. And then it came down. They started giving these visas, what are they called? They won't give visas on our passports to people from Arunachal Pradesh, and also from our army generals and all on official visits to China because they were serving in Jammu and Kashmir, the stapled visas. So they started giving us stapled visa. Then they changed the length of the border. If it is a border, 3,000 some kilometers or whatever it is, they excluded the entire border with Kashmir and said, no, it's 2,000 and some kilometers. Then they started renaming places on our side of the border, giving them fictitious Tibetan names, constantly provoking us. And then they have actually sabotaged all the agreements that we have, 1993, 1996, 2005, 2013. They have violated them with impunity by what happened in Galwan. So the question is, what should China do, not what we should do? We are not going to commit aggression against China. We are not strong enough. We are in a defensive posture. The question I ask is, why is China militarizing Tibet so much? What for? Who's threatening them in Tibet? India is not. America is not. Nobody is. Now Russia is the big friend, but Russia is not going to threaten them in any case. But it is to keep us on the back foot and keep us under pressure, impose costs on us, and demonstrate to the world that they are the premier Asian power. And India must accept that. And they are very upset that India doesn't accept a second status. They're really upset. They're really upset. Then they look for excuses. Oh, no. We are against you because you're becoming close to America. For heaven's sake, they were far closer to America. And even today, look at their trade, $700 billion or something with the United States of America. And they still have 200,000 Chinese students in the United States. So it's all humbug. It's all humbug. So the question, answer to your question is, we should make ourselves stronger, build our capacities, bide our time, not look out for a conflict with China. And the best deterrence against China is our accretion to our defense capabilities, which we are building, but which will take time.
Sir, I had a question for you in the context of America and China. As you pointed out, as you hinted, and we all believe that America has this policy of use and throw. And they seem to be in love with us, but which actually is not genuine. They're in love with us because we are the only possible bulwark against China. If we act pricey, where else will they go? They will not say, oh, India is acting pricey, okay, let us now fraternize with Bhutan, Nepal. All those do not matter. So are we not in a position to call their bluff and dictate our terms? Because who else can be counter to China than India?
Well, yes and no. Certainly because they want now to deter China, and without India, there cannot be that kind of deterrence they need. Because insofar as deterrence in West Asia and Western Pacific is concerned, they don't need us really. Because they have South Korea, they have Japan, they have Philippines. So they have bases there, they have the 7th Fleet there, they have physical deployment of their troops in that area. So they're pretty strong. And they are strengthening their alliances, as you know. What they need India is for burden sharing in the Indian Ocean, because the only navy in the Indian Ocean which can give protection to the sea lanes of communication is the Indian Navy. Australia is far, far away. On the western side, there is no other navy. And we are willing to do that. because it also serves our interests, that you look after China and the Western Pacific, we'll help you by protecting the sea lanes of communication, your movement of your warships and everything else as they move through the Indian Ocean, one. And number two, that we can pose a threat to the Chinese naval operations in the Indian Ocean, which is why we are cooperating with them in terms of accessing military hardware like the PI-8 maritime surveillance aircraft, which are very vital. Now we're buying that Guardian armed drones and everything else. We are also getting access, not sufficiently, to underwater sea technology to keep a tab on the movement of Chinese submarines in the Indian Ocean. So this is what is happening. But they have stabbed us in the back in Bangladesh. They stabbed us in the back in Afghanistan. They have been stabbing us in the back in Pakistan for decades. And at one moment, if you remember, Obama and Xi Jinping, they agreed that both of them will oversee the security in South Asia. And that worried us a great deal, that they are now wanting a G2 globally and in Asia. And then we protested strongly and Obama walked back. But this has never left our suspicious minds that at some stage, realizing that they can't really challenge China, then let's have an agreement with China of some sorts. And then we have to be careful. We should not be left out on a limb that we go too far with the Americans against China, and then we are left to fend for ourselves. So we have to keep our doors open to China as much as we can. And finally, as you've seen in, as I mentioned, Georgia and Romania and Ukraine earlier, we are too big for them to bring about a regime change. But they can cause problems to us at home by destabilizing us from within and making our life difficult.
Quraishi Saab, Election Commission of India is seen as a model internationally. However, the critics argue that its independence has been compromised over these years. How do we respond to this kind of a criticism, which is running across the globe? As Sibal Saab spoke about the West and the narratives that they are creating against India, how do you respond to this criticism?
Yeah, so first of all, I do feel concerned because I have basked in the glory of the Election Commission of India's neutrality importance worldwide. And as I said yesterday, that any institution is known by the incumbent. The undersecretary in a ministry who you are dealing with, if he is good, the government of India is good. If he is demanding money from you, the government of India is corrupt. So it depends on incumbents, and incumbents fortunately come and go. So there are phases. Now, 15 million people, 1 billion voters, the sheer magnitude. Do you know the last election, despite the controversies that you mentioned, was a flawless election? There used to be 600 or 700 repolls because of the disturbances. This time the number was very low, about 150 or so. So in the 2-3 controversial thing that the notices were not given to the Prime Minister to this, the glory and of the effort gets lost and subsumed. And there, of course, this is questionable. They say, no, that since there are top leaders, we treated them equally and we chose not to punish them. Now, to my mind, this is not a good option. Law for the law, everyone is equal. Because there are two top leaders, including the leader of opposition, this kind of thing. My only suggestion to Election Commission, actually physically sometimes they do call me or through my writings. In fact, I'm most hesitant to comment on them. Although you will agree that if I'm pained as a citizen, I'm doubly pained because I also had laid 2-3 bricks on that institution. Therefore, my pain is more. So I told them half the problem is because they don't communicate well. So whenever the CEC had taken a press conference, I have got impressed with his press conference. I have gone away with some facts and figures which we did not know, because Election Commission has more information, more facts than any one of us. But the point is that there is a debate going on about figures. You are talking to me, I am talking to you, the whole nation is talking, but the person who should be talking about it and who knows about it is keeping quiet. I told them, look, silence is not your option. And if you go to the press and media, nobody can say that you seek publicity. Nation wants to hear the CEC as an institution for their confidence. So keeping quiet is not the option. I think one mistake they are making is they're not communicating. Call a press conference. I'm sure 99% of the allegations will be explained because there are mechanisms, and institutionally this institution is so strong and has a tradition of total neutrality and great respect globally.
My last question, Sibal Saab, uh, how do you see the global narrative around Kashmir? And are we doing enough to counter it on the international platforms?
Well, the global narrative on Kashmir started in 1947-48, and it has endured for decades. Even now, the issue is still formally with the United Nations. There is still the semblance of a UN presence, not in Jammu and Kashmir now, but in Delhi. Not that there was an effort by China to bring it back on the UN Security Council, but this was thwarted by our Western friends, and it was not allowed to be put on the agenda. In terms of attacks on us, Pakistan uses the UN Forum, UN General Assembly, and they say pretty vicious things about what's happening in Kashmir on the issue of human rights and this and that. Unfortunately, Turkey has been joining them, not in terms of speaking at length about the human rights situation, but mentioning the situation in Jammu and Kashmir in the speech delivered by President Erdogan, except in the last UNGA, because he had applied for membership of BRICS, and he thought maybe India has to be mollified a bit. In the OIC, this issue keeps getting raising, but it is formalistic. And each time they raise it, we give a very strong rejoinder. And here again, unfortunately, Turkey is very, very supportive of Pakistan. When Erdogan has visited Pakistan, he has unnecessarily referred to Jammu and Kashmir. The Iranian Khamenei, when he visited Pakistan, no, he made a statement in Iran where he talked about problems in Palestine and Kashmir. And when the Iranian president visited Pakistan a few months ago, again in the joint communique, Kashmir was mentioned. So these are essential pinpricks because Pakistan has lost so much standing globally that they're not taken seriously anymore. And everybody now accepts two, three things. One, of course, they are struck with terrorism. Secondly, that the phenomenon of radicalization of Pakistani society and the turmoil currently that they're going through actually reduces their credibility when they talk about, when they want to talk about Kashmir, because there are lots of human rights issues on which they themselves are unanswerable, including these blasphemy laws and what have you, and the treatment of Ahmadiyas and stuff like that. So from our point of view, the Kashmir issue is now manageable today. Yes, when we abrogated Article 370, then we had the international press lambasting us on that, the Western press, and the UN Human Rights Commission and the UN Secretary General's office. They had some comments to make. So, well, these are certain pinpricks that we have to bear. But at the same time, if you look at the kind of joint statements that are coming out on terrorism, in the G20, if you look at the statement that came out, in our bilateral statements with the United States, with France, even with the UK, or with Germany or other countries, the paras are very strong. And we have succeeded now making a reference to cross-border terrorism as a given. In all these statements, you'll find a reference to cross-border terrorism. And of course, the other language, which we introduced and which is now accepted by our partners. So there is a big change in the situation.
So, as we conclude, let us remember that Bharat's story is still being written on a global stage. Thank you so much to both of our esteemed speakers for your profound insights. Thank you.